The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. Lucy Douglas stood at the defense table, her hands pressed flat against the scarred oak surface, feeling the weight of 200 eyes drilling into her back. The gallery was packed, reporters in the front rows, clutching their phones like weapons. Her mother in the third row, rosary beads clicking through trembling fingers, and somewhere behind them all, she knew without looking, were the friends of the man she'd killed. Judge Patricia Brennan peered down from the bench with the kind of contempt usually reserved for the worst humanity had to offer. Her reading glasses sat perched on her nose, magnifying eyes that had already convicted Lucy long before the trial began. The silence stretched thin as wire, ready to snap. "Miss Douglas," the judge said, finally, her voice dripping with disdain. "You've heard the prosecution's case. The evidence is overwhelming. You shot Henry Scott 3 times in his own home, a home you broke into in the middle of the night. You left him to bleed out on his kitchen floor. And now you want this court to believe you're the victim?" Lucy's public defender, a tired-looking man named Robert William, who'd been assigned her case exactly 9 days ago, started to rise. Lucy touched his arm, stopping him. She'd been silent through 3 days of testimony, watching the prosecution paint her as a jealous, unstable woman scorned. A 28-year-old Latina from South Phoenix with a GED and a string of restaurant jobs who'd fallen for a man above her station and couldn't handle rejection. "Your Honor," Lucy said, her voice steady despite the earthquake happening in her chest. "May I speak?" Judge Brennan's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "Miss Douglas, I strongly advise you to let your attorney—" "I want to speak." Lucy's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "I've been silent for 3 days while they told their version of what happened. I think I've earned the right to tell mine." The prosecutor, Amanda Sterling, blonde, Ivy League, wearing a suit that cost more than Lucy's monthly rent, shot to her feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. If the defendant wishes to testify, she needs to be sworn in and subject to cross-examination." "I'm not testifying," Lucy interrupted, keeping her eyes locked on the judge. "I'm making a statement to the court. You allowed Mr. Scott's mother to make one yesterday. You let his business partner speak for 20 minutes about what a pillar of the community he was. I'm asking for 5 minutes to tell you who he really was." The judge's jaw tightened. She glanced at the prosecutor, then back at Lucy. The courtroom held its breath. 5 minutes, Judge Brennan said coldly. "And Miss Douglas, I warn you, grandstanding won't help your case." Lucy nodded. Her hands were shaking now, but she kept them pressed against the table, grounding herself. She thought of her father's voice, years ago, before the cancer took him. "Mija, the truth is a weapon, but you have to know how to aim it." 7 months ago, Lucy began, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, "I met Henry Scott at the restaurant where I worked. He was charming, successful. He asked me out, and I said yes. Within 2 months, he'd asked me to move in with him." She paused, watching faces in the jury. "Everyone told me I was lucky. A girl like me, with a man like him." Amanda Sterling rolled her eyes audibly. "Your Honor, let her speak," the judge said, surprising everyone. Lucy continued. 3 months into our relationship, I started feeling sick, nauseous, exhausted. I took a pregnancy test. It was positive." She watched the judge's face carefully. "Henry was thrilled. He talked about marriage, about giving our child everything he never had growing up. He started planning our future." She reached into her jacket pocket slowly, aware of the bailiff's hand moving toward his weapon. She pulled out a small envelope and held it up. "This is a letter from Dr. Sarah Kimball at Phoenix Women's Health. It's dated 4 months ago. It states that I was never pregnant, that the positive test I'd taken was fake, one of those novelty tests you can buy online that always shows 2 lines. The courtroom erupted. Judge Brennan's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order!" Lucy waited for the noise to die down. "I didn't buy that test. Henry did. He planted it in my bathroom, then helped me take it, making sure I saw the positive result. He wanted me to believe I was pregnant because pregnant women don't leave. They're trapped." "This is absurd," Amanda Sterling snapped. "Your Honor, this is a desperate—" "I have proof," Lucy said quietly. The words fell like stones into still water. "Henry made a mistake. He ordered the fake test using his Amazon account. The receipt is in discovery. My attorney just didn't know what he was looking at. It's dated 3 days before I discovered I was pregnant. Robert William was flipping frantically through a cardboard box of documents. His face went pale. Your Honor, I need a moment to review. You'll get your moment, Judge Brennan said. But her eyes were fixed on Lucy with something new in them. Not sympathy. Not yet. But interest. Keep talking, Miss Douglas. Lucy took a breath. This was where it got hard. When I confronted Henry about the fake pregnancy, he didn't deny it. He laughed. He said I should be grateful that no one else would want someone like me. Someone from where I came from. He said he was doing me a favor. Her voice didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. That's when I tried to leave. And that's when I learned why his previous girlfriend, Stephanie William, left Phoenix 3 years ago with a broken collarbone and a restraining order that mysteriously disappeared from public records. Amanda Sterling went very still. Lucy noticed. You didn't know about Stephanie, did you, Miss Sterling? Lucy asked. Funny how that happens when someone has enough money and connections to make uncomfortable truths vanish. But Stephanie didn't vanish. She just moved to Seattle. And she's been waiting 3 years for someone to ask her what Henry Scott was really like behind closed doors. Judge Brennan leaned forward. Miss Douglas, are you saying... I'm saying that when I told Henry I was leaving, he put his hands around my throat and squeezed until I saw stars. I'm saying he told me that if I walked out that door, he'd make sure everyone knew what a crazy, lying bitch I was. That he'd ruin what little reputation I had. That no one would believe a girl from the barrio over a successful businessman. Lucy's voice hardened. I'm saying he locked me in his house for 2 weeks, Your Honor. 2 weeks where I was allowed to use the bathroom only when he supervised. He controlled every bite of food I ate. Where he apologized and cried and swore he loved me, and then hours later would scream at me for looking at him wrong. The courtroom was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Heavy. Breathing. The night I killed him, Lucy said, and she looked at each juror in turn. Wasn't the night I broke into his house. It was the night I escaped from it. He'd finally gotten careless, finally gotten drunk enough to fall asleep without locking the bedroom door. I ran for the kitchen. I was going for the back door when he woke up, when he came after me. When he grabbed a knife from the block and told me the only way I was leaving was in pieces. She reached into the envelope again and pulled out a photograph. This is from the hospital, taken 4 hours after I shot Henry Scott. That's a 7-inch defensive wound on my left forearm. The prosecution mentioned it in their case. They said, I must have gotten it when I struggled with Henry after breaking in. But the angle is wrong for that story, isn't it? The blade went from wrist toward elbow. That's what happens when you're backing away from someone. When you're trying to protect yourself from a downward strike. Robert William was on his feet now, energized. Your Honor, I need to recall the medical examiner. You'll get your chance, Judge Brennan said. But her voice had lost its contempt. She was looking at Lucy differently now. They all were. Lucy felt something crack open in her chest. Not relief, not yet, but the possibility of it. My father was a cop, she said quietly. 30 years with Phoenix PD before he died. He taught me to shoot when I was 16, taught me to never hesitate if my life was on the line. He taught me to document everything, to trust the evidence, to know that the truth has a weight that lies can't match. She looked at the judge. Henry had a gun too. A 9mm Glock registered in his name. The police found it in his nightstand. They mentioned it in their report but dismissed it as irrelevant because it hadn't been fired. But why does a man need a loaded gun in his nightstand, Your Honor? What was he afraid of? The question hung in the air. Or, Lucy continued, who was he planning to use it on? Amanda Sterling's face had gone from confident to calculated. She was already planning her next move, already thinking about how to salvage this. But Lucy wasn't done. You want to know why I didn't call the police during those 2 weeks? My father used to tell me stories about cases that fell apart because the victim didn't fight back hard enough, didn't scream loud enough, didn't have enough bruises to prove what happened. He told me about women who died waiting for the system to protect them. So I documented everything. I took photos of every bruise, every mark. I recorded conversations on my phone when Henry wouldn't notice. I saved text messages. I built a case against him because I knew that when I finally got out, people would ask why I didn't leave sooner, why I didn't just walk away. She looked at the jury. I didn't walk away because I couldn't. And when he came at me with a knife, I didn't have time to call 911 and wait for help that might come too late. I had my father's training and a man's gun that I'd taken from the bedroom. I had 3 seconds to decide between his life and mine. So I chose mine. The silence was deafening. I chose mine, Lucy repeated, her voice breaking for the first time. And I'd choose it again. Because I matter. Because my life has value. Because I'm not just some girl from South Phoenix who should be grateful for whatever scraps a man throws her way. I'm a human being. And I have the right to exist without fear. Judge Brennan removed her glasses slowly. Her face was unreadable. Miss Sterling, I assume the state will need time to investigate these new claims? The prosecutor looked like she'd swallowed glass. Your Honor, the defense has had access to all discovery materials. The defense was appointed 9 days ago, the judge interrupted coldly. And from what I'm hearing, there are significant evidentiary issues that need to be addressed. We're going to recess for 72 hours. Miss Sterling, I suggest you use that time to contact Miss Stephanie William in Seattle and to review every piece of evidence with fresh eyes. Mr. William, I suggest you hire an investigator. A good one. She looked at Lucy. Miss Douglas, you'll remain in custody pending further investigation, but I want to be clear, this court takes allegations of domestic violence and self-defense very seriously. If what you're saying can be substantiated, this case looks very different than it did an hour ago. The gavel came down. Lucy felt her knees buckle, and Robert William caught her elbow. Behind her, she heard her mother sobbing not from grief but from relief. The reporters were already racing for the exits, phones to their ears, breaking the story. As the bailiff led Lucy back to the holding cell, she passed close enough to Amanda Sterling to hear her hissing into her phone. Find out everything about Stephanie William. And pull Henry Scott's sealed juvie records. If this blows up, I want to know about it before the press does. In the holding cell, Lucy sat on the concrete bench and let herself shake. She'd aimed the truth like a weapon, just like her father taught her. She'd made them see her not as a criminal or a statistic, but as a woman who'd fought for her life and won. 3 days later, the charges were dropped. Stephanie William had told her story. 5 other women had come forward with similar experiences, their voices finally finding purchase in the cracks Lucy had created. The sealed juvenile records revealed a pattern of violence stretching back to Henry Scott's teenage years, incidents his family's money had buried deep. Lucy walked out of the county jail into Phoenix sunshine that felt like forgiveness. Her mother held her tight, and reporters shouted questions she didn't answer. She was free, but she knew the real work was just beginning, rebuilding a life, processing trauma, learning to sleep without nightmares. But she was alive. She had fought, and she had won. And somewhere, she thought, her father was proud. The truth, after all, was a weapon. She just had to learn how to aim it.